In 2022, Visa's net revenue reached $29.3 billion. This is 22% more than a year before. These are impressive numbers for any business. But how is Visa actually making money? Who pays them? Is it you, the banks, corporations? I know, these are a lot of questions. And in this episode, we'll find the answers. Today, you will learn how you pay money to Visa without even knowing.
Payments are a huge deal.
Indeed, they are. According to the Nielsen report, in 2022, credit, debit, and prepaid cards issued in the US generated over $9.5 trillion in purchases, 13% more than a year prior. Visa, it's an unbeatable leader that generated 61% of those purchases. At the same time, 26% of all transactions were carried out with MasterCard and 11% with American Express. Only 2% of the total purchase volume was generated using Discover cards. Although we often hear, I have a Visa card, Visa doesn't actually issue credit or debit cards. In fact, they have no direct relationship with individual consumers at all. Card issuing is done by banks and financial service companies, while Visa is the network responsible for secure payment processing. Visa is an intermediary between three entities: you, the customer making the purchase, the bank that holds the customer's money, and the merchant selling the product or service. So the payment networks play a middleman role by connecting these three entities. You might think of them as a telecom or an internet network, but instead of voice or information, Visa's network carries money. And it's more powerful than you might think. Visa can process up to 24,000 transactions per second. They connect over 18,000 banks and other financial institutions worldwide. And every time you use your card, there is a whole series of messages going through the network. First, from a point of sales or an online store to your bank. Then comes the verification and authorization for your payment. After, the message goes back to finishing the transaction and transfers the money from your account to the merchant's account. However, the only thing you see is a message that your payment is successful. That's why, even though you have a Visa logo on your card, technically it is your bank's card. So all of your payments, conditions, rewards, and cashbacks are set by financial institutions, not by payment networks. Visa doesn't make any profit from credit card interest either. The bank are the ones charging those interests. So if Visa doesn't charge or keep any credit card interest, how does Visa make money then? In 2022, Visa gross revenue reached $39.6 billion. A majority of it, about 36%, comes from data processing fees. They are charged from vendors when a customer uses a credit or debit card to pay for their goods and services. Around 34% of Visa's revenue come from service fees charged from card issuers that work with the Visa branded payment method. International transaction revenues earned from cross-border transactions and currency exchanges comprise about 25% of the company's revenue. Another 5% are mainly license fees for using the Visa brand or technology. So basically, Visa gets money from banks and merchants for processing payments because fast and secure transactions are fundamental for both financial institutions and retailers. At the same time, you, as the customer, don't pay anything directly to Visa, but you sure do that through your bank and anything you buy online or offline.
If you could own a royalty on people spending money, like Visa or MasterCard, it's the greatest business in the world.
Did you know that every time you use your Visa card to buy something, the retailer pays a data processing fee, also known as a swipe fee? It varies, but generally, it's somewhere around 2% of the total purchase amount. The fee depends on the type of merchant, the cost of sale, the payment product, the processing technology used, and the region or country. Additionally, risk can be a driver of larger fees. That's why the percentage is often higher for credit cards than debit cards, as well as for certain types of businesses that are riskier than others, like casinos, for example. Fees for debit cards from the nation's largest banks are capped by the Federal Reserve at 21 cents per transaction, plus 0.05% of the transaction amount. The biggest part of Visa's revenue comes exactly from the swipe fee paid by the merchant to the bank that issued your Visa card. The bank keeps a portion of the fee and passes the remainder on to Visa. While many big corporations don't notice the impact of swipe fees, small businesses struggle. In 2021, US merchants paid $137.8 billion in swipe fees. It's almost 7 times more than 20 years ago when the total amount of swipe fees barely reached $20 billion. According to the National Retail Federation, swipe fees are most retailers' highest operating cost after labor. This drives up consumer prices by an estimated $900 per year for the average household. That's why you often see cash discounts from small businesses. By going cardless, you get an instant 4% off your goods. Surprisingly, while the banks and payment networks keep raising fees, the Federal Reserve biannual survey estimates that the transaction processing cost is now lower for banks. Currently, it costs around 4 cents compared to about 8 cents per transaction a decade earlier. On the other hand, many argue that Visa, like other payment networks, has a balanced structure, and banks pay more than merchants. As we've seen, service fees charged from banks bring only 2% less revenue than the data processing fees charged from businesses. And we should also consider that Visa works with nearly 18,000 banks compared to tens of millions of merchants worldwide. So, of course, an individual bank pays more than an individual business. But then again, whose revenue is higher? Because both a local bakery and Amazon are businesses that pay almost the same data processing fees. It's also worth mentioning that cash is not cheap either. Cash transactions require merchants to have cash drawers, armored trucks, managerial level people to count the cash and ensure no robbery takes place during each shift, and so on. Additionally, card payments speed up the checkout lines and facilitate e-commerce. What do you think about the swipe fees? Let me know down in the comments. Now, Visa is a huge global corporation that operates in more than 200 countries and employs over 26,000 people. However, its beginnings were rather humble. The history of the Visa card dates back to the late 1950s, when Bank of America launched its Bank AmeriCard. The card allowed customers to make purchases using credit at several participating merchants. We won't go too deep into the rise of the first credit cards because we talked about that in another video. Feel free to check it out if you haven't done it already. After you're done with this video, of course. Now, back to Visa's humble beginning. You can't tell Visa's history without mentioning Hock. He's considered a founder of the Visa we know today. It all started when young Hock worked as an assistant manager at the National Bank of Commerce in Seattle, which was franchised by Bank of America. Hock got interested in the Bank AmeriCard program and began to study closely. You should know that the first general purpose credit cards were only used locally in California, and Bank of America was simply licensing the program to other banks in the US. But Hock saw much more potential in Bank AmeriCard. He believed that it could become the national credit card system, so he began creating a plan for a unified platform for both bank and merchants. At first, Hock suggested making a nonprofit organization owned by the member banks to share the cost of creating a new payment system. After polishing his plan, the banker approached Bank of America senior management, ensuring them that a single unified credit card system will be more efficient and cost-effective than multiple regional ones that existed at the time. At first, Bank of America was skeptical of Hock's proposal, but eventually agreed to support it. In 1968, Hock founded the National Bank AmeriCard Inc., NBI. This organization used a decentralized model with regional and national offices that had significant autonomy to respond to the needs of their local market. Even though Bank of America gave up control of Bank AmeriCard in 1970, they still retained a right to license the program abroad. And by 1972, they had representation in 15 countries. As the network grew, international banks encountered a variety of issues, and in response to that, Bank of America hired Hock as a consultant to do the same job as he did with the domestic licensees. That's how the International Bank Card Company, Banco, was created. 2 years later, in 1976, Bank AmeriCard became Visa, and the International Bank Card Company, Banco, received the name Visa International. The name Visa was brought by the company's founder, Hock. He believed that this word was instantly recognizable in many languages, which made it easy to remember. Now, Visa is the most dominant payment network, accounting for almost 53% of all electronic cards in circulation in the US. To compare, MasterCard only comprises 32% of American cards. But what is Visa's secret to becoming a sector leader? The answer lies in two words: Chaordic organization. This word combination might be new to you, but the concept is pretty easy. It is a type of organization that combines elements of both chaos and order. The term Chaordic was created by Hock to describe the way Visa operates. This type of company has no central authority or hierarchy. Instead, power is distributed amongst all members. This approach allowed Visa to create an adaptable company that empowers employees to make decisions and take risks. Hock believed that traditional hierarchical structures were not flexible enough for the rapidly changing world of finance. While flexibility and adaptability got trendy in the last couple of years, Visa was already applying these principles in the 1960s, and many tie its success to this business structure. Hock did what most senior executives would consider total madness. He gave up the illusion of control in order to allow a great organization to be born. Today, Visa is one of the largest payment processing companies in the world, with billions of cards in use and thousands of member banks. Whether it was the organization's work environment or not, Visa managed to achieve great results from the very beginning. It quickly gained traction, and by the 1970s, Visa became the global leader in the credit card industry. Throughout its existence, the company was always focused on innovation. So by 1976, Visa introduced the first electronic authorization system. It allowed merchants to verify card transactions in real time. In the next decades, Visa launched several new products and services, such as debit cards and e-commerce solution. In 2006, Visa announced its preparation to become a publicly traded company, Visa Inc. For this, Visa Canada, Visa International, and Visa USA were merged. At the same time, Visa Europe became a separate unit owned by its member banks that received a minority stake in Visa Inc. After completing its corporate restructuring, Visa went public in 2008, raising $17.9 billion in one of the largest US public offerings to date. Visa was outperformed only 6 years later when Alibaba raised $21.8 billion in capital by going public on the New York Stock Exchange. Visa's success leaves no doubt, but almost every victory is bittersweet. Over the years, the company had several legal cases and investigations: antitrust lawsuits, anti-competitive conduct, interchange fee claims. Visa had it all. Experts say that it's hard to think of other industries that had more antitrust litigations than the payment processing sector. However, the most iconic case is the retailer lawsuit against Visa and MasterCard over excessive fees. It is a whole saga that started back in 2005, when a group of retailers filed the first lawsuit against Visa, MasterCard, and several banks. In 2012, there was a settlement reached between the retailers and Visa and MasterCard for $7.25 billion. However, many large retailers opted out of the settlement and filed separate lawsuits. Target, Macy's, JCPenney in 2013, Walmart in 2014, Home Depot in 2016. Then, in 2018, Visa and MasterCard reached a $6.2 billion settlement. But despite that, retailers continue to fight. After numerous settlement appeals and lawsuits, the case is still unresolved. But all the litigation didn't affect Visa's stock much. If you compare the payments network stock growth to the S&P 500, Visa consistently outperforms, at least for the last 5 years. Today, Visa has grown to become one of the largest payment processing networks. The revenue is growing the same as the number of transactions made with Visa cards. They didn't only manage to make payments technology, they have created a commodity. I bet not many people can imagine their lives without card payments. And now you understand how you pay Visa without knowing it by simply using your card. See you in the next video. Bye-bye.